This is graphing linear equations using slope and y-intercept. So far, I've shown you how to graph linear equations or lines using 2 points. In the first recording, I showed you how to graph a line using any 2 points that you find in the chart. And in the second recording, we looked at how to graph lines using x-intercept and y-intercept. So today we will be graphing the same lines using slope and y-intercept. It is very important to remember that to graph using the method I'm about to show you, your line must be in a specific form. Today, to graph the line using slope and y-intercept, your line equation must be in this form that is called slope-intercept form. Some of the letters in this equation may look familiar to you. Of course, you have your y and your x. But the other two letters, this b and this m, look new. B stands for the y-intercept. Now keep in mind, y-intercept is a point where your line will hit the y-axis. That's the point with coordinates 0, comma, b, whatever that b number is for each specific line. M in your equation is the slope. Slope determines how steep your line is and the direction of your line. For example, the line that looks like this and the line that looks like this, they both have positive slopes because they're both rising from left to right. But the line that is on the left, this here, will have a smaller slope value than the line that is on the right, this line right here. The right line is a little steeper. On the other hand, if your lines go down from left to right, so we say they're falling from left to right, the slope will be negative. The same applies to the negative slopes as it does to positive slopes. The steeper the line is, the larger the value of the slope would be. If the line is not rising or falling from left to right, in other words, it's horizontal, the slope of it is 0. Finally, if the line is vertical, so going up and down like this, the slope is undefined. Well, now that we have some information about the slopes, what they mean, and our equation form, slope-intercept form, we can start graphing our lines. Let's go ahead and graph a line that is in slope-intercept form. So this is going to be in y equals mx plus b. We will still be using 2 points just like before, but this time around we will find them in a different way. Here's the first example, y equals 3 over 2x minus 2. I want you to compare it with the equation y equals mx plus b. Here clearly your m, which is the number next to the x, is 3 over 2, and remember that is the slope. And b, which is the number by itself right here, is negative 2, and that is your y-intercept. So the y-intercept has coordinates 0, negative 2, and that in fact will be your first point that you will graph. So to graph the line that is given to you in slope-intercept form, just like ours is, we will start by placing the y-intercept or our b on the y-axis. So the point has coordinates 0, negative 2, and that is your first point of the 2 that you need to graph the line. Now, to get to the second point, we will not be replacing x with anything like we did before in the previous two sections. You still can, but if the equation is in this format, it's easier to do the following. We will use our slope, which is 3 over 2, and we will treat it as rise over run. What this means is from the point that you just placed on the coordinate plane, your 0, -2, you're going to rise 3 units, meaning you go up 3 units, and then to the right 2 units. So up 3, 2 to the right, wherever you end up, which for us happens to be 2, 1, is your second point. You connect the 2 points and you're done. Let's graph another one. So this looks very similar with the exception of the slope being negative. As you notice, your b, which is our y-intercept, still has the same number, -2. So that will be the first point that you place on your coordinate plane, 0, -2. From here, you will be using your slope to travel to the second point. Your slope is -3 over 2. So that is our rise over our run. To use the negative slope, instead of going up and to the right like we did in the previous example, from the point that you just positioned on the coordinate plane, you will go down 3 units, and mine is a little short, so kind of go down 3 here, and 2 to the right. So again, I went down 3 units because it's a -3 for the rise, and 2 to the right. Wherever you end up is your second point, you connect them, and here's your line. Notice it's a falling line, and we expected that because the slope was negative. Let's graph another one. Well, here is an example, y equals 2x, and it looks just a little different than before. So reminding you that the general form of the slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. So it's easy to identify that your m is 2. So m is 2, which is the slope. Well, the problem with the slope is, remember, it's rise over run. That's what we need for graphing, and as of right now I only see 2, which is your rise. To add the run, place it over 1, and there you have your fraction. 2 over 1 is your slope. Positive slope, the line will be rising from left to right. Now, another problem with this equation is that it's missing plus b. It doesn't have anything added or subtracted in the back of the equation. Well, if that's the case, you can always say that you have a 0 added or subtracted, which means your y-intercept is the origin, 0, 0. That's the first point you place on the coordinate plane. From here, you will be traveling 2 units up per your rise and 1 unit to the right per your run. And here is your second point, and you connect, there is your line. Here is the last problem, y equals x minus 1, reminding you that it's the general form of mx plus b. Now b here is easy to identify, it's -1, which means your first point on the picture will be 0, -1. That is your y-intercept right here, 0, -1. From here you need to use your m, which is the slope, and it kind of looks like you're missing the number next to the x, but keep in mind you always are allowed to add a 1 next to the letter if you need that number next to the variable. So slope is 1, of course we need rise over run, so it's going to be 1 over 1. And then we can now travel to our second point. So from the green point on the picture, I go 1 up since it's positive, 1 to the right, and I end up right here. Here is your line. So in the next two examples, I'm not going to ask you to graph, although you can to practice, but I will ask you to simply find your slope and your y-intercept. So slope, remember, is m and y-intercept is b if your equation is in the format y equals mx plus b. Now, if you look at our two given equations, they're definitely not in this format. We do not have the y by itself in either one of the questions. So before you are able to state what your m and what your b are, you need to get that y by itself. Keep in mind that when you're solving for the variable, you need to remove everything that surrounds that variable to the other side of the equal sign. So in my first question, you have the 3x and you have this negative 2 that are together with the y and they need to go to the other side. Negative 2 is multiplying your y and that will be removed last. So I will now remove 3x. To do that, I will drag it towards the other side and do the opposite of what I see. It's positive on the left, so I'll make it negative on the right. Now your equation is negative 2y equals 10 minus 3x. To remove the negative 2, I will divide every single part of this equation by negative 2. The negative 2 cancels next to the y. 10 divided by negative 2 is negative 5. And then negative 3 divided by negative 2 is going to stay as 3 over 2, but it will become positive since both 3 and 2 are negative. So plus 3 over 2x. So what is the slope m and what is the y-intercept b? Well, the slope m in the form is always next to x. So even if it doesn't come first after the equal sign, you still need to make sure that you state that your m is 3 over 2 because that's next to the x when y is by itself. B is the number that doesn't have a letter and our number is negative 5. Some of the questions will be okay with you saying that b is negative 5. Some of them will want a point, 0, negative 5. Pay attention to what the question wants. For number 2, I will do a very similar thing here. I'm going to take negative 2x, move it here, and add it. So 4y equals 24 plus 2x. And then I will divide all terms by that 4, which cancels the 4 next to the y, leaving you with y equals 24 divided by 4 is 6, plus 2 divided by 4 is 1 over 2x. Well, that means that your slope is 1 over 2 and your y-intercept b is 6, or if you're asked for a point, it's 0, 6. Here's the last example for this section. Give vertical and horizontal intercepts, write in slope-intercept form, and then give the slope. So this equation is not in slope-intercept form. It's not in y equals mx plus b form. In fact, we're asked to write it in that form. But before we do that, we are asked for the vertical and the horizontal intercepts. Do not get scared of these words. Vertical intercept is the intercept with the vertical axis. So another word for it is the y-intercept. And then the horizontal intercept is the x-intercept. So we'll find those first and then we'll rearrange our equation just like we did in the previous two examples and write it in slope-intercept form, and that will allow us to state the slope. So to find the y-intercept from the previous section, keep in mind you will be replacing this x with the 0. So negative 5 times 0 plus 2y equals negative 4. Negative 5 times 0 is 0, so 2y equals negative 4. Divide both sides by 2 to get y equals negative 2. Your y-intercept or your vertical intercept is at 0, negative 2. Unless you're not asked for a point, then just say that it's negative 2. Now to find the x-intercept, we'll go back to our original problem And instead of making x is 0, we will make y is 0. Negative 5x plus 2 times 0 equals negative 4. 2 times 0 is 0, so negative 5x equals negative 4. Divide both sides by negative 5. X is positive 4 over 5, because if you divide a negative 4 by a negative 5, you get a positive, even though it's still a fraction. So your x-intercept is at 4/5, comma 0. Again, unless you're not asked for a point and only asked for a number. So you found your y-intercept or your vertical intercept, your horizontal intercept. Now we have to use the same equation that was given to us, put it in slope-intercept form, and state the slope. Remember, the slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b, so we need to get the y by itself. To get the y by itself, you will first take negative 5x and move it to the right by adding it. This gives you 2y equals negative 4 plus 5x. Now we will be dividing everything by 2, which cancels the 2 next to the y. We get y equals negative 2 plus 5 over 2x. This is your slope-intercept form. We got your y by itself. You may want to rearrange the negative 2 and the positive 5 over 2x just so it looks exactly like y equals mx plus b, since mx comes before b. If that's the case, you can always write 5 over 2x minus 2, so the slope m is 5 over 2.